Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Oxford Seminars in Cartography. My name is Nick Milley. I'm the map curator here at the Bodleian Library, and along with my colleague Liz Bagent, who we will be seeing later, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's seminar. So, without further ado, let me begin by announcing some other events taking place. And I'll begin with our sister series at the Warburg Institute, Maps and Society. These sessions are hybrid, so you can go along in person or you can tune in online. And on March the 26th, Mimi Cheng from the Kunsthistorisches Institut in Florence will be talking about aesthetics and authority in 19th century maps of China. So, and maybe a little bit of crossover from today's talk. We shall see. And then moving on to the 7th of May, Anthony Terry, who is an independent researcher, will be talking about the Derretero Inglese, unraveling the mysteries of an early 18th century English wagoner in Peru. So that's something to look forward to. The Cambridge Seminars in the History of Cartography, their next meeting is on the 5th of May, and Juliette Dumassy from the Université d'Orléans, who we know very well here at TOSCA, will be speaking on the rise of local cartography in Europe, 12th to 14th century. This will be an online-only event, so you can go along to the Cambridge Seminars in the History of Cartography website, and colleague Stuart has kindly put that in the chat so you can get a link there. In terms of future events that TOSCA is running, we have another field trip. This is one of our events which are in-person events, and that will be on Monday the 27th of April. I think I'm announcing this for the first time, when David Fletcher will be, another independent researcher who may be familiar to many of you, will be talking about his new book, The Queen's Atlas, which is work on Christopher Saxton. If you want to come along to that, spaces are strictly limited. So if you can contact me and express an interest in attending, we have only 20 places and quite a number of those have already been booked up. The event will take place here in Oxford on Monday the 27th of April at 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and it will be in the Western Library. We then have two more online seminars. On the 4th of June, Jean-Marc Bess, who was originally booked to speak in last season's session, but we rescheduled, he will be talking on geography and Catholic censorship in Europe at the end of the 16th century. Jean-Marc is from l'École des hautes études en sciences sociales in Paris. So it will be good to see him. And 2 weeks after that, on the 18th of June, we will be welcoming Nick Bolton, who is the CEO of Ordnance Survey here in the UK. And he will be talking about Ordnance Survey, 21st Century National Mapping Agency. So that will be very much Nick's vision into the future for the mapping of Great Britain. I would also like to just mention the people who support TOSCA and enable this all to take place: the Bodleian Libraries, the University of Oxford, the School of Geography and the Environment here at the university, the Charles Close Society, Lovell Johns, who are cartographers based in Oxfordshire, and finally the Friends of TOSCA. So thank you to all of you for your support. It's very much appreciated. Now we move on to this evening's talk, and we're thrilled to welcome Vera Dorofeeva-Lichtmann, also from l'École des hautes études en sciences sociales in Paris. Vera, it's really good to welcome her here because Vera's been a regular attender for many years now, so she's very familiar with the way our seminars work. She will be talking, let me just tell you a bit about Vera. She studies ancient Chinese conceptions of terrestrial space and their continuous influence on Chinese cartography. She defended her PhD thesis in 1992 at the Institute of Asian and African Studies at Moscow State University. And since 2000, she is a chargée de recherche at the National Centre of Scientific Research, that's CNRS in France. She's a permanent member of UMR 8173, Chine, Corée, Japon, CNRS EHESS, and an associated member of UMR 8504, Géographie Cité, also at CNRS EHESS. In 2017 to 2025, she's been a recurrent senior visiting scholar of the Max Planck Institute of the Institute of Science in Berlin. On September the 22nd last year, Vera successfully defended her habilitation, which was titled Conceptualisation et visualisation de l'espace terrestre en Asie orientale, des textes fondamentaux chinois anciens jusqu'aux cartes modernes. Or for those of you who prefer it in English, conceptualization and visualization of terrestrial space in East Asia, from fundamental early Chinese texts to modern maps. So, Vera will be speaking today about the unique large format print of the general map of the Qing Empire by Li Mingche, 1751 to 1832 in Göttingen, tracing its cartographical origins and journey to a German university. So Vera, if you would like to reveal yourself, and we shall begin. So here is Vera now. Welcome, Vera. We very much look forward to hearing from you, and the floor is now yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for having invited me. It's a great pleasure and a great honor. And yes, Göttingen State and University Library, or Niedersächsische Staatsuniversitätsbibliothek Göttingen, possesses as the single extant print of a large format general map of the Qing Empire drafted by a well-known Chinese scholar active in the late 18th, the early 19th century, Li Mingche. This map is another case of a so-called rediscovered cartographical item, which was peacefully sleeping in a library and for quite some time stayed outside scholarly attention. In this respect, the map is similar with the Selden map case, and I dare say the map discussed today is an equally important rediscovery in the history of East Asian cartography. Here is some general information about the map. It was acquired by the Göttingen Library in the mid-19th century and restored in 2009. The map is undated, but it can be reliably dated, approximated. Its date can be reliably approximated to 1825, 1826. Its title, place names, and textual interpolations all are in Chinese. The main attraction of this map is its authorship. I shall return back to the author a bit later, and especially that the map is unique. It is a hand-colored woodblock print, and the woodblock printing is aimed for producing several copies, yet none apart from this one has survived. And at the first glance, it's a rather strange place with respect to the map's origins. So the map is found now in Göttingen. The map was rediscovered, properly catalogued, and digitized in 2014. And since September 20, a digital copy of the map became accessible through the site of the Göttingen State University Library and the Calliope Verbund. The Calliope Union Catalog is an archives information management system and a national information system for personal papers and manuscript collections in Germany, which advantage is that it includes a relatively detailed descriptions of the listed items, well, of course in German. And the map is also entered into the IIIF International Image Interoperability Framework. So the links should be provided in the chat. Thank you, Stuart, very much in advance. So for those of you who would like to examine the map in detail right away, you can do so. And for this purpose, the IIIF link is the best. Regretfully, there is no entry in the CAR database of all the maps managed by the State Library in Berlin. And the reason is that the map was originally listed as a manuscript. If we look now from the Chinese side, the map was reported as missing by the early 20th century. For instance, in the Panyu County Gazetteer, it's the gazetteer of the place where the author of the map was born. It states that the map is not an evidence that it existed, but it's not an evidence missing, or to be more precise, not yet in evidence. And although I'm credited with the rediscovery of the map, it was purely accidental and occurred only to persistence of Göttingen librarians who since many years have been seeking to attribute the map. Göttingen State and University Library possesses the so-called Asch-Sammlung or Asch collection, and the collection is constituted from donations of Baron Georg Thomas von Asch, whose father moved to Russia from Silesia during the reign of Peter the Great. And however, for his university studies at many Russian Germans, he went first to Tübingen and then moved to Göttingen, where he received his doctorate. Then he returned back to Russia, joined Russian state service, where he held several important positions, including that of the physician general of the Imperial Army during the First Russian-Turkish War. So Asch was a passionate collector and apparently had funds for collecting, and he systematically sent his the object which he managed to collect, books, coins, drawing, printed and manuscript maps, to his dear Göttingen. The sending process started in 1771 and ended shortly before his death in 1808. The collection includes several Chinese and Japanese items, so the librarians reasonably suggested that the map in question might be a stray item which originally belonged to Asch donations, but which couldn't be properly listed because of its language, exclusively Chinese, as I have already said. So it was listed with a note Asch with a question marks, and I owe this. The discovery of this map to the Japanese maps, to the Japanese manuscript maps from the Asch collection, which are one of the most famous items of this collection. These are the maps drawn by a Japanese merchant and sailor Daikoka Kodayu during his detention in Russia during 10 years from 1783 to 1792. And I take this occasion to refer to a recent article on these maps written in co-authorship with Ekaterina Simonova-Gudzienko. The article and the entire volume are open access. I hope that the link will also be provided in the chat. And the volume includes 2 more articles on maps on Arabic and Chinese. And just to raise your interest, our article is the first study of all the known versions of the map of Japan by Daikoka Kodayu. There are 7 complete and 1 draft. And it's the first of a study published in English. The Göttingen Library possesses 3 versions of these maps, including the earliest and the most valuable. They are easy to get, but some versions, especially 3 found in Russian libraries, you can see one of them on the slide, are not really easily accessible. So in early 2014, I was inspecting the Japanese maps at the Department of Manuscripts and Rare Prints in the Göttingen Library when the head of the department at that time, now retired, Dr. Helmut Rolfing, and a specialist on Georg Thomas von Asch and his collection, and Bärbel Mund, still working at the department and most helpful, asked me to take a look at the Chinese map, which has been possessed by the library for almost maybe already 2 centuries, but has not yet entered the public catalog for the simple reason that it couldn't be correctly attributed. I systematically studied every single manuscript document related to the Asch collection, and in particular the correspondence of Baron von Asch, where he meticulously listed his donations. And also there are manuscript catalogs of the 19th century. And now Asch correspondence is completely digitized, but I had a chance to go through the original manuscripts. So actually, the advantage of Asch collection that Asch listed in 2 copies everything which he sent. One he enclosed in a separate letter, and then another copy he enclosed to the sending. And like this, we have really very detailed documents. Also, his letters require an ability to read manuscript German, French, Russian of the late 18th and early 19th century, as well as a little bit of Chinese and Japanese, including their transcriptions in 3 languages. And I found quite some interesting and useful data on the way, but absolutely nothing related to the map in question. And the reason was that I was simply looking into the wrong direction, being so preoccupied with the Asch personality and the version of the provinces of this map from his donations. And I completely overlooked the other options, some quite evident. At the same time, Ines Eben von Hacknitz has been searching for this map since years. She published an article about the reference to this map by English scholars of the mid-19th century, which allow one to suggest that the map arrived from the place where it was created, Guangzhou or Canton, to London, somewhere between 1832 and 1844. I should confess that I reviewed the book where her article was published, but I completely overlooked reference to this map. Things like this happen because I was completely blind to everything apart from Asch version. So, and 2 of the articles which she refers to are especially important. So first is a quite detailed description of this map by Morrison in an English, in a Chinese repository journal published in English in Canton or Guangzhou in 1934, actually the year when the author of the map passed away. And then a reference to this map in a review of maps of China by William Hartmann in his address to the Royal Geographical Society in 1844 is already found in London. So like this, we can suggest that it was in 1932 in Guangzhou and already in London in 1844. Here, I provide a citation from Hartmann, which you can read. I just added the opinion transcription of the author's name, but the most interesting for us that it clearly shows that the map could be inspected the day of this report in London. And there is a young Chinese scholar who published an article in Chinese in 2023. In 2023, Zhu Hongbin, who develops on the journey of the map from Guangzhou to Göttingen via London. So then the last point, so here you can see that the map is stamped. So the stamps which were used in Göttingen Library from 1735 through 1937, and one of the stamps was used from up to 1850. It is found in the map in question, and this stamp has a characteristic feature, a colon at the end, not found in any other stamps in use. So taking the fact that the map was still in London in 1844 and was stamped by the map which was not used After 1850, we can suggest that the map arrived between 1845 and 1850 to Göttingen. So now why the map landed in Göttingen? The reason is lying on the surface, although it is often overlooked even by German scholars, what somehow comforted me. Because Göttingen, Georg August Universität Göttingen was founded in 1734 by the King George II, King of Great Britain and Elector of Hanover, and at least till the mid-19th century maintained very close relations with Great Britain. You can see the view of the Göttingen University drawn on the turn of the 18th, from the 18th to the 19th century. The library, the building is not anymore there, so it was replaced by a later building. And also the map of Göttingen of 1730, where it shows where the university library is. And another example of this British collection of Göttingen is that the university is hosting the James Cook collection. So before I discuss the map itself, here's reference to my article, which provides the general discussion and preliminary analysis of the map. I cannot say the first one, as the map was described in much detail by Morrison and summarized by Hartmann in the mid-19th century, but I hope that I could add some important observations for understanding its place in the history of cartography. The article can be downloaded from some institutional subscriptions, and the link will be provided in the chat. Also, but those of you who for some reason cannot download can contact me directly. I shall be happy to send you the article. And the article also includes an appendix on its georeferencing by Li Mingche, who accomplished this work when he was a GIS developer at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science in Berlin. I also thank in the article quite many of my colleagues, because for me, the map is much too late for my competences, so without their precious help, I could have never been able to write this article. I thank them all. Their names are all mentioned in the article. I hope some of them are present today here. So now I shall try to highlight the most important characteristic and some aspects not discussed in much detail in my article. And I would like to begin with its material characteristics, as materiality of map is currently in the focus of scholarly attention. First of all, we deal with a restored map. And restoration has, of course, its drawbacks. As you can see, here are the photos. Just few photos were made before the restoration, and they were more private photos, not really very systematic. So the map had the so-called hang-pea framing used using silk taffetas. It is most likely silk, but still has to be determined. You have there are wooden sticks left to the left and to the right, straps to hold the map together. So the sticks and the straps were eliminated as unnecessary during the restoration, which is, of course, a little bit regretful. You can see some close-up on the damages. One can say that the damages are very few, not many. And if we can compare to maybe the maps which many of you know from the histories of Chinese cartography, much earlier maps dated from the Mawangdu, dated by the 2nd century BC. Here we have damages where the parts of the map are not there, and so sometimes when we have redrawing, we have restoration of the map. So in the case of the map found in Göttingen, fortunately, no restoration of graphical elements of text was needed. So the map shape was not really damaged from the content of the map was not damaged. So, and for conserving the map, the library invented this special box where it is now safely stored. So if we take a look at the map, and here we have the restored dimensions. So as you can see that the paper, the map includes, it is drawn on paper. So the entire dimensions of the map are quite big. It's but what is the most interesting for us, that the map body, or the map which contains the graphical part of the map and the text, it is also quite big. It's 86 to 148 centimeters. You can see that there are traces from the missing wooden sticks, and there are also quite interesting elements as closed buttonholes. I will show them a bit later as a close-up. So the map is printed on one single sheet of paper. I inspected it several times, also with colleagues, so I'm quite sure in this. And this already shows that using a single sheet of paper and also using quite fine colors makes it as rather expensive and refined literati-oriented cartographical product. So another part is that the map is printed from several block prints, and here these are estimations by my colleague, Professor Qiu Jingjia, who personally inspected the maps, and he could see the very fine seams between the block prints. So he estimated, it's all with quotation marks because it needs a look of the specialist, but this also shows that when the seams between the blocks are barely visible, it also means that it's a high quality product. The reason for using several pieces, wood blocks, and not one, which was theoretically possible, is very simple. It's for the storage, for the reasons of storage. The map also has an original doublage, which is now hidden completely after the restoration, but so the map, the paper part had a doublage. Then there was another doublage by several pieces of paper, in each case of the map with its framing. And it can only be seen now with this see-through method. So I can show you how we managed to discover it, because again, if the photos of the map were made before restoration, at that time one was not so much concerned with this material aspect and didn't pay attention to this doublage. And you can see also that one can see the damages of the original doublage, which can be seen through the light. And I take the opportunity to mention Kathleen Petter, whom some of you might have met at the ISHMAP 23, which took place at the Institute for at the Max Planck Institute for the History of Science, because from Kathleen, who is especially, her specialty is also printing material, the Chinese block printing. So she taught me, and I still remember this date, when we arrived to Göttingen, and the first thing she did with another map, she took it and looked at it through the light, and it completely changed my view of this map. So since then I started to take more attention to the material aspect of the map. As you remember, I mentioned this buttonhole elements. So here is a close-up and of it from before restoration. And after the restoration, so the backs are hidden by the paper, one sheet of paper used as a backup to hold the map together. And also we can see the stamp here on the map, a photo made before restoration. And here you can see that the paper which was used for the restoration as a backup is well thin enough so one can see that there is a stamp, and we again inspected. There is nothing else, no other text on the back of the map apart from this stamp. So now as far as the content of the map is concerned, the map displays a general view of the expansion process of the imperial realm under the Qing dynasty to Manchuria, Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Tibet. You can see that the northern territories are delimited by a distinct borderline with the Russian Empire. The south is also delimited by a clear borderline, but the borders in the west, the direction of the ongoing expansion, are still not demarcated, thus being open for expansion. Administrative division applies only to the core territories of the imperial realm, around the basins of the Yellow and the Yangtze rivers, the 18 provinces of the inner lands, or we can say China proper. They are divided between each other by neat borderlines tinted in different colors, with the exception of borders of the northern and northwestern provinces which are left open. The 18 provinces constitute a compact cluster of units densely filled with place names and visually outstanding from sparse new territories. Also, only territories which constitute the Qing Empire are filled out with place names and landmarks. The adjoining lands are left blank. The only exception, and quite interesting, is Korea, which, as you can see here, has a rather unusual shape. So Korea contains some landmarks, mostly rivers, in just a couple of place names, thus showing a potential interest of the Qing Empire in the Korean territories. The same political principle applies to the maritime space. The sea is blank, with the exception of islands adjacent to the coast and belonging to the imperial realm. The largest among them are Hainan, Taiwan, and Sakhalin. Neither Japan or Ryukyu are found in the map. There is a textual piece in their place. And the name of the map's author is found at the end of this general introduction, which constitutes a square-shaped textual passage. And the signature is as follows: drafted by Li Mingche, bearing style name Qinglai. So, what is the context in which Li Mingche drafted the map? So Li Mingche spent most of his life in his native Guangdong province in the south of China, which location favored openness to foreign knowledge. He was born in Panyu city, located to the south of Guangzhou, now one of its districts, and died in Guangzhou. Li Mingche was primarily concerned with transmitting the achievements of the Western astronomy, and through astronomy was also interested in Western geocartography. At the same time, he was a Taoist master. A link between Taoism and sciences is well known, and there are some studies on this topic. I refer to them in my article. One can see his interest in Western astronomy in his main work, Yuantian Hushuo, illustrations and elucidations on the round heavens. So the main text is preceded by a preface by one of the most outstanding Qing scholars, Zhuan Yuan, who in 1817-1826 served as a provincial governor of Guangdong, and also prefaces to other late Qing scholars, as well as the preface by Li Mingche. So 2 days of this work appear in scholarly literature, 1819 and 1820, but having analyzed the dates on the front page and the dates of the prefaces, I shall not go into detail, but I have a lengthy footnote there, so one can conclude that the main text was cut shortly before late August 1819 and printed in mid-1820. So both dates are correct in their way. The third volume includes a geographical section with a series of maps. It begins with a rather ordinary for the East Asian cartography of the time map of the world, relying on the modern Western cartographic framework. It is drawn according to a global projection with a 10-degree graticule and with a prominent ecliptic line. The map is copied from an earlier world map drafted by Zhuang Tingfu, a well-known astronomer. And the map consists of two separate hemispheres, each printed on 2 pages. So, and you can see that delineation of continents and islands in the map is quite approximate. But in 1833, the map was translated and extensively commented by Julius Klaproth, a prolific Orientalist of broad interest, and published as a separate book in French. Before 1810, Klaproth shared his time between Prussia, his homeland, and the Russian Empire, having traveled up to the Chinese border. And during the last 10 years of his life, he worked in Paris and paid considerable attention to translating East Asian maps. In the title of his commented translation, Klaproth gives the map an ambitious name, Mappemonde Chinois, Chinese Mappemundi. But on the translation of the map, Klaproth refers to it as a planisphère chinois, also Chinese planisphère. But without going into details, the translation by Klaproth is very faithful to the form of the source. He meticulously copied all the graphical elements, shapes, and then translated the textual elements. Yet he makes a major mistake in the general interpretation of the map, as it is Chinese only in its language and place names, being in its turn a translation from a Western prototype. After the world map, Li Mingche places a general map of the Chinese imperial realm. I shall return to it a bit later. And then followed by maps of the 18 provinces of the China proper. So you can see here is an example of one of the provincial map of Fujian and at that time Taiwan part of Fujian. And it should be noted that maps of the 18 provinces by Li Mingche rely on the first block printed edition of the Kanxi atlases, the so-called Qing court atlases, and several versions of this court atlases were printed from wood blocks and copper plates. So, and Mario Kamps extensively worked on this topic. So Klaproth translated also these 18 maps, but this translation stayed in the form of manuscripts now kept at the British Library. They were bought in 1840. You can see here his translation of the map from Fujian, and again, you can see how Klaproth copies the graphical part of the map, including even cartographic symbols. I recently investigated these maps translations together with translations of other groups of maps. And I think, again, if any of you cannot download this article, I shall be happy to send it to you. And only after my article was published, I realized that Klaproth translated the versions of the 18th provinces from the work by Li Mingche. So, and here is a quite strange map, which was included by Li Mingche into his work. It is played between the world map and the provincial map. It is called the General Map of the Chinese Empire, and this map is no more than a rough schematic sketch. It is somehow doesn't fit in a way the collection at all. So, and this you can see that the map uses a very rough outline of the river network. There are some things which are absolutely outdated. For example, the course of the Yellow River is depicted as it was depicted in the maps of the previous Ming Dynasty. There are quite some interesting distortions, in particular in depictions of the islands. For example, Japan is reduced to one small faraway island. There is an oversized Taiwan. There are big and small Ryukyu and quite big Tsushima Island. So this rather unusual distortion seems to convey a view from the southeastern coast. So the islands closest to it are oversized, and those which are more far away are diminished. So this map is a curious example of the Chinese tradition of diagrammatic maps, which just roughly approximate relative locations of landmarks without much concern for topographical accuracy. At the same time, the map bears a timid stamp of modern cartography in the form of the mark at the top of the map. There is a prime meridian, which is mentioned, and also, the longitude latitude lines themselves are not delineated. So, and now, if you compare the sketch map to the map from Göttingen by the same author, you can see that something happened in between in terms of the elaboration of its cartometric properties. And even taking into consideration that the maps have very different formats, that the sketch map is found in the book, and the map in question is a large format map. So the reason of this interesting breakthrough in Li Mingche's cartographic achievements are his acquaintance with one of the main cartographers of his time, Li Zhaoluo, who Li Zhaoluo was his younger contemporary. He arrived in 1820 to Guangdong, and he also worked together with him, and necessarily influenced Li Mingche's cartographic competences. Only so the map by Li Zhaoluo, its first edition was published in 1832, the year when Li Mingche passed away. And maybe it couldn't be published earlier because of respect to his elder fellow cartographer. So the map by Li Zhaoluo is larger and much more elaborate. It is block printed on 8 scrolls. The map area is it's almost 2.5 meters to 3.5 meters. And it has clear affinities with the map by Li Mingche. There is, however, a quite interesting difference. If Li Mingche keeps exclusively to the latitude-longitude graticule, Li Zhaoluo returns back to the practice of combining the latitude-longitude graticule with the traditional square grid, showing both on his map. The usage of Chinese cartography of traditional square grid and of the latitude-longitude graticule at the same time is an interesting question, and it is directly related to the Göttingen map because it explains the choice of projection in the map. But in order to comprehend the importance of the projection choice, we have first to compare it with the projection used in map, which apparently served as a template for Li Mingche. And this my suggestion that Li Mingche was considerably influenced by one of the most acknowledged cartographic representations of Asia, created during the golden age of French cartography, la carte la plus générale, et qui comprend la Chine, la Tartarie chinoise, le Tibet, by Jean-Baptiste Bourguignon d'Anville, which was drafted in 1734, printed this particular copy in 1736. The map introduced a model for representing the anti-Qing imperial realm in the Western cartography for at least through the end of the 18th century. I do not touch on editions of this map. I discuss this with references to studies by Mario Camps and Marco Caboara in my article. Just I wanted to say that Anville's map is based, as we all know, on Chinese sources, the Qing court atlases. But however, they can see the court atlases, they do not include any key map. There is no general map of China. And it was Anville who first derived a synthetic view of the anti-Qing imperial realm from the separate sheets of the Kansi Atlas, it seems that now it seems to be quite an easy task. It was much more complicated at that time, and now I can refer to yes, I will refer to it a bit later. So there is a general view of the from the Kansi Atlas of 17 printed in 1719, which is assembled together. Which is an online searchable digital general map, but it was much more difficult task at the time of Anville. So if we now compare the two maps, so Anville's map is almost 3 and 4 times smaller than the map by Li Mingche, but it seems to me that there are some clear affinities in the layout. So the layout of Anville's map provides a classical example of combining a cartographic body with decorative elements, and spaces not occupied by cartographic body are filled out by cartouche. Li Mingche follows this layout, but cartouche, which were not current in Chinese cartography, were replaced by textual passages, so thus adapting the map for the Chinese audience. There is one important difference in the cartographic area. So in the map by Li Mingche, it doesn't include the Caspian Sea and territories to the east, and territories to the east from it and up to Pamir Mountains, which were not of much interest for the Qing Empire. And then, this piece, which was cut off, is again replaced by a textual passage. If we take a look at the textual passages, so and here is the reference to the assembled Kansi Atlas, which can be observed on this link, but which is not very easy to show to show at the PowerPoint presentation. So you can see these replacements which I have just mentioned. And so what are the textual passages? I mentioned one is the general introduction, and two other discuss two important place names. Kunlun Mountains, here associated with Tian Shan, and the Yellow River source, which is, as you can see, tinted in the map in bright yellow. There is another interesting feature in the map. There is no Baikal Lake in both maps, whereas the Baikal Lake is present in Kansi atlases. There is also a very quite similar map shape of Taiwan in Kansi. Many Kansi atlases, many quad atlases show just a part of it. And the maps also have very characteristic shape of Sakhalin. You can also see a certain similarity in depicting China proper by the elements, by using just tinting the borders in different colors. And it's also quite interesting that in both maps, the desert is depicted as a blank space, while in traditional Chinese cartography, it is depicted in the other way. You can see an example below. So now about the projection. So Anvil uses the conical projection, and in Li Mingche uses pseudo-cylindrical projection, which advantage for the Chinese audience is very clear that the territories which were closer to the prime meridian and of the most interest to the Chinese audience, they looked as if they were mapped through a square grid. It's looks very close to the square grid. So now, just to mention the way to depict the landmarks, you can see in the map that rivers and lakes appear much wider and larger than in Western maps. Yellow river source, as I already mentioned, colored in bright yellow. Mountains are depicted in quite artistically in yellow and blue, also quite traditional way. Blue means high mountains. And so in some, I would say that this map is a classical example of a culturally hybrid map. On one hand, it bears quite clear stamp of the Western influence, in particular of the French cartography of the 18th century. And on the other hand, it uses Chinese system of cartographic conventions. I already mentioned some georeferencing, which I would have not been able to do. It was done, as I mentioned, by my colleague Lin Nung Yao. And it was, there are no surprises in the results. So the map is much more accurate when one maps the Chinese proper, and it's much less accurate in periphery. However, the most interesting for me was an attempt to compare how lakes were depicted. So, and you can see in in blue the real shapes of the lakes, and in red how the lakes look in the map and the missing Baikal Lake. And you can see the principles of georeferencing. They are discussed in the appendix to my article. So now about the authorship of the map. So as I say, I say always that the map was drafted by Li Mingche, but it was maybe most likely painted by someone else. So there are some imperfections which show this. One is that two provinces, Shanxi and Shanxi, are not look like one province, because one forgot that there is a yellow river which works as their borderline. So if you count the elements, it looks like the map has 17 elements and not 18. There is another interesting part, which was at first an enigma to us. So that at first we supposed that for some reason the very famous Taihu Lake was missing. And actually the lake is not missing. Its contours are in the map. It's just that the painter just missed it. He didn't notice the lake, so which again shows that maybe the person who may put colors into the map, he was not a cartographer. So again, the cover was certainly not a cartographer because there are quite rough mistakes, as you can see in the latitude. So to the left, you can see that the carver made quite strange mistakes. And the last question is, what would be the main point of the map of why Li Mingche wanted to draw his map? And the answer seems to be in the title that he has chosen for his map of China, because similar titles, the titles which refer to the Qing Empire as the Qing Empire everlastingly unified, are used for these famous blue maps, which were created exactly in the first quarter. Most of them were created in the first quarter of the 19th century, although some copies appear a bit later. There are also congener colored maps, which also use the same title of the Qing Empire, the Great Qing everlastingly unified. And so my suggestion, if one compares the titles, is that the point of Li Mingche that he, from the way how he modified his title, you can see that he calls his map terrestrial map, applying the longitude and latitude graticule. So he tried to draw a modern map, so to say, blue map, which would correspond to the standards of the Western cartography. So I would say that if Anvil was used as a template, blue maps served him an anti-template. And however, the fact that only one print survived of this map showed that the whole enterprise of Li Mingche failed because his map has not become popular, in contrast to the blue maps. So to conclude that the period of the recurrent printing of blue maps and their polychrome congeners coincided with the period of professional maturity of Li Mingche. Taking into consideration his passionate interest in Western science, he should have thought that these maps didn't correspond at all to the new standards of cartography, which started to be diffused in China with the production of court atlases based on application and view survey methods. For some reason, the Qing court atlases didn't include any general map of the Chinese empire, so a modern general map of China was still missing. Wishing to keep up with the turn in Chinese cartographic surveying, he made an attempt to create such a map. Being an enthusiastic adept of Western science, he used the Carte la plus générale by Danville as an outline, enlarging it, reconfiguring it from a conical projection to pseudo-cylindrical, more common for China, and filling it out with topographical data according to Chinese cartographic conventions and relying on Chinese sources. However, having changed the projection, he took a step backward from the perspective of modern Western cartography, introducing into this map much more distortions. He also completely overlooked the importance of distance scales, neglecting to provide any in the map. Yet, despite all his efforts to make the map accessible to educated Chinese public, it doesn't seem to have raised much response in his homeland, in contrast to his much more traditional magnum opus on astronomy. And the only copy of it that has survived to date is found found its home in the Göttingen State and University Library. So thank you for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Vera, for that very, very stimulating presentation. It's a real treat to have your detective work acknowledged and then some very enlightening cartographic analysis at the end. So Vera has kindly agreed to answer questions from the audience. So as usual, could I invite you to put your questions, to type them into the question and answer, which you can find at the bottom of your screen. Please don't put them in the chat because we won't be monitoring that chat for questions. So I can see we have one question already to get us going. So Diana Patterson asks, were the multiple wood block printed at one pressing? I would imagine that separate pressings would make it easier to get a better image.
That's an interesting question. I hope I understood it correctly. You mean multiple, you mean, could you maybe reformulate your question? Do you mean that one prints many times from one block? Or I understand the question that to get the better image, but
yeah, could I invite Diana to elaborate a little bit on that? But I perhaps could ask Vera in the meantime to tell us a little bit about the printing process in general. You've said that this is the only version known, but do we have any information about how many were printed initially? And I know you said that, no, right.
No.
Are there any traditions that might help us to make a guess of any sort?
That's a good question. How many could be done? Of course, it couldn't be done. The more one prints, the worse the quality becomes because it becomes used. But I would say I should ask Kathleen because it's a good question which I've never thought about. So, but we do not know how many were printed. One knows that I have an impression that one have been discussing one version. Also, it's not only a print. There is quite a lot of coloring.
Yeah.
For this reason, it was regretfully first listed as manuscript. And yes, that's the main problem.
Yes.
It is a print, but it's quite pale because the print is quite pale. It's black and white. And if you look just at the print without coloring, it doesn't look very, very nice. It's like these court atlases. They're not beautiful. So it was coloring what was made beautiful, but I have an impression, with very little I know, that it looks like one discussed this one print, which first arrived to London, although the whole idea of block print was to have several copies.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
I should ask how many could be done in principle.
Thank you. That would be interesting to know. Now, in the meantime, Diana has kindly elaborated her question, and let me read that for the benefit of you, of course, and for our audience. The pressure of a press over a large area decreases from the center.
Yes.
So if you put the same map under a press with a small block, you could apply more pressure and thus get a better image. So if you put the map under the press 5 times for one map. So is that clear? She says, I hope so.
Yes, that's clear. I've never thought about this. Quite an interest, because I still have to learn quite a lot about materiality, because I was looking into the content of maps for looking, let's say, at material part and technical part on the side.
Yes, there's so many aspects to consider. So we very much look forward to your thoughts on that in due course. Peter Barber has sent in a question, and Peter says, you were wondering how the map reached Göttingen. It might be worth checking, Peter suggests, the sale catalogues of George III's son and the younger brother of Ernst August, King of Hanover. This extensive collection of books, maps, and manuscripts was sold in London in 1844, at which point the British Museum acquired many items, including maps.
So could it be that it was bought by in Göttingen, as you said, that it was sold by King in 1844?
Yes, well, Peter says they were sold in London, in a London auction, and therefore the sale catalogues of that auction might be a fruitful place to look. Perhaps the date of 1844. Is that suggestive? Was that when that was when the showing in London happened? Yes.
Thank you. That I never thought about this, because I was wondering, for me it's not clear how it made its way to Göttingen, but I thought that it was rather like given to Göttingen to reinforce, so to say, the collection of the library.
Yeah. Thank you. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that exhibition in 1844 in London, which you said you had the record of. And so it was obviously an advertising that this showing in London would happen. But I wonder if in the proceedings of the society there is any record of questions asked and response to the map.
Unless I missed something, there is the map is just one of many, because the idea was to describe Chinese maps, Chinese and Western maps of China. So it is one of the maps which was mentioned by Hartmann, and it's just so it doesn't take too much place in his article. It does take quite a lot, but still it is one of many. So he enumerates many items, and among them appears this one.
Excellent. And was that display occasioned by anything in particular, or perhaps we don't?
I only know the article. Again, the only thing I know which was described in Hartmann, where he says, well, and we can observe the map, here's it. He gives some more detail. His article is available. I think it's easy to get.
Yes.
So, and he just, so I didn't notice anything apart from it could be inspected. And here is because he refers to some maps which couldn't be just to quite some famous Chinese maps. And here he said, and this one we can see. So that's the most interesting part of his article, with respect to the map, of course.
Yes, yes. Thank you. We have a comment from one of our audience members who wants to remain anonymous now, and he or she says how interesting it was to hear about the travels of the map itself, as well as the construction. So yes, I'm sure many audience members have found your detective work admirable and very interesting to be on the trail there. And so interesting to have a collaborative search with your colleagues whom you generously acknowledge there.
Yes, I would say the collaboration, first of all, again, I can confess because originally I work in quite early, not very early, but quite early Chinese texts, like 5th century BC, 2nd century AD. I never heard about Li Mingche. So I learned about him through this, because of this map and because of generosity of many of my Chinese colleagues, because the library also generously authorized me to share with the image with anyone who could help. So there are quite a lot of admirers still of Li Mingche, because I think he has a shrine and he is quite a well-known person. So I kind of became quite attracted to him. And and there are, of course, enormous help from quite a lot of colleagues who work on this period of Chinese cartography. And everyone, it was a patchwork. So, for example, Diana Lange, I think she's there. She gave me quite a lot of information about Tibet. Mario Kams, of course, was much helpful about about Kansi. Elke Papelitsky also helped. Also, she did a very important work describing how the desert was depicted in Chinese cartography. So it's really a collective, I would say, collective work. And again, if the librarians were not so keen, really, they were desperate to determine because there was and there is an East Asian department in Göttingen, but no one working on cartography. There is an excellent librarian who is specialist on Korean sources. He was able, of course, to approximate. He could translate the title. He could well approximate the date of the map, more or less, but he couldn't go any further. So as I say, it's really a collective work.
Yeah, that's very, very nice example of collaboration. Thank you. Now we have two questions now from our audience member, Mam Timin Sunundwula. And the question is, did the geographic location differ? I beg your pardon, did the geographic knowledge differ depending on the location of the authors, for example, in Guangdong and Fujian? And a follow-up question, correspondingly, how different are the details and style of the maps created in China in the early 19th century?
Well, that's the question is far beyond my competences. So as I mentioned, what I was intrigued in this sketch map by Li Mingche, where we have, as I said, it was as if he looked from, as I saw, as if he looked from Guangzhou and he saw a very big Taiwan, very big Ryukyu, and very small Japan. It was really, I was almost as if he was looking from the south, because it's very, very unusual view. And but it would be interesting to compare locations in the blue maps, for example, with locations in Li Mingche. But I think that, again, there are I think that the map will be, certainly it's considered as a great discovery for in China. So there are quite a lot of persons working on this period who are keen to continue to work on the map. But I didn't compare. I do not think that in the map there are some strange locations up to now. I haven't noticed anything.
Thank you. And might I just ask about the mystery of Lake Baikal? Why you think that was missing from the map? I mean, you make the point that it was missing from the Western possible prototype, but it might have been seen as an opportunity to rectify the failures of Western cartography in a way.
That's a mystery for me. So I suggest that and again, it's only my guess, that Li Mingche didn't depict it because Anvil didn't depict it. And Anvil, it's not, he just left the space blank.
Yeah.
It was impossible that he didn't know about the lake, but he just, in a way, it's like also also in our ville maps, there is also no Japan or Ryukyu, but there is a small note that there is about Japan in text. So in Li Mingche, he follows this tradition, just they are not depicted, but he like replaces the place where it should be by the text. So for me, the main mystery, which I really do not know the right answer, because there is Lake Baikal in Kansi atlases, in the court atlases. But for some reason, Alville just leaves a blank space. Maybe just I do not see any good reason. Maybe it was too big and he thought, well, it's not relevant to, let's say, to the Chinese territories. Maybe it was like this reason, but I really do not know.
No, I guess there are always things that remain, questions that remain to be answered. So a final question from the audience comes from Frank, and Frank asks, how accurate is the scale of the map? Without any reference to distances.
We have not determined, well, it could be determined, but there is no scale given in the map.
No.
There is nothing. And I think, again, because the square grid, its advantage, that it served the scale, the Chinese square grid, because one said, it was always said that this, the check corresponds like it was like 100 li to 100 li or 400 li to 4. So it was, so in Chinese square grid, the scale is not needed. So my guess is that Li Mingche, he was not considered as an outstanding geographer in China. He was more astronomer, and he was very much influenced by his younger colleague. But my only explanation that he just didn't understand this. The scale. It's like, for example, there are quite interesting mistakes in some Chinese maps when certain grids, certain scales are considered as an ornament. One didn't understand what it is. So, of course, one can approximate the scale in the map, but for this I have to contact Lin Nongyao, so it could be only approximated through georeferencing.
Yeah. Well, our final question is not a question. It's from Sarah Coulson-Phillips, and she writes in to say thank you for a very interesting talk. And I'm sure that she echoes the thoughts of all the audience members. We had a very large and a very international audience this evening, and it was a pleasure to welcome you all in the audience, and such a pleasure to hear Vera's seminar for us this evening. So thank you again, Vera. Thank you to our audience for joining with us this evening, and we look forward to your company in our next events. And thank you again, indeed, Vera.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and for most interesting and useful questions, which make me think, which make me look at certain things which I've never thought before.
I'm glad it's useful for you. Thank you, and good night, everyone.